Be Inclusive was purpose-built to help you define, track, and share digital accessibility audits. One of the biggest goals was to make this as friendly as possible to folks new to auditing, so a lot of care went into making the process intuitive, with a guided setup full of helpful tips and links to further documentation. Navigating to the dashboard, you'll see a list of projects, each with any number of associated audits. On my dashboard are 2 projects. One is called Be Inclusive, and that one has a completed audit report, and then another one called Demo Project with an open audit still in progress. And finally, there's a link to start another. Because of the 5-step WCAG EM methodology, defining an understandable and repeatable framework for testing, I was able to take a lot of inspiration from it to structure this app. Be Inclusive projects are essentially the first 3 WCAG EM steps. That's where we define the scope, explore the target site, and select representative target samples. Project audits cover WCAG EM Step 4, where we audit the target samples identified in Step 3. And the resulting project audit report is the 5th and final step of WCAG EM. That's where we report the findings. Let's see what the project creation workflow looks like. Clicking on the Start Another Project button leads me to an intro of the 3-step process, explaining that we start by defining the scope, then document specifics after exploring the target site, and then we finish by defining representative target samples. But rather than getting started with a brand new project, I'm going to show these steps in an existing one so you don't need to see me typing. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the Be Inclusive project and click Edit. This will lead us to Step 1. Step 1 is where we define the scope. We set a project name, a conformance target, and we write out the scope of what we're auditing. I'm actually going to update this to WCAG 2.2, the latest standard. If I scroll down a little further, this is where we also identify the baseline support by itemizing user agents and the tools that we're going to be using to test. These fields have a type ahead for common examples. So for example, let me go ahead and add Opera. So if I type in OPER, great, Opera latest. You can also type in whatever you like in these fields. It's not limited to just the options in the dropdown. So I can type in something custom, and that would work just fine. Same goes for testing tools. So over here, I can go ahead and include, let's say, Accessibility Insights. Accessibility Insights. Great. You'll also notice that there are tooltips for nearly every field, providing some additional information. Let's move on to Step 2. Step 2 is all about exploring the website, app, or digital workflow to understand its purpose and functionality. So here's where we would itemize the technologies that are being used, note any essential functionality, common relevant pages, and page types and templates. The content in these fields will be shown at the top of Step 3. So moving on to Step 3. As you can see, the fields that we entered in Step 2 are at the top of Step 3. When I scroll down, this is where we also define the target samples for evaluation. Target samples can be web pages, app screens, or even specific workflow steps, as you can see in these last 3 that I have here. WCAG EM recommends at least 1 randomly selected sample for every 10 structured samples. This page provides some help text to surface that recommendation, though it's not a requirement to move forward. And with that, we can click on this That Looks Good, Let's Review to get a final review of the project. Here we'll see all the details of all 3 steps that we just completed. And if everything looks good, we can say, oh, this is good, let's save it. With those 3 steps completed, we now have a project ready for an audit. Moving on to audits, the heart and soul of Be Inclusive, this is where Step 4 of the WCAG EM methodology, called Audit the Selected Sample, is represented. Because this is where users spend a majority of their time, a lot of iteration and user experience testing went into this workflow to make it as simple as possible. I'm going to go ahead and open the audit in progress for Be Inclusive. When we arrive at the audit page, we'll have the ability to define a short name for the audit itself. To get started, we select a target sample from the dropdown. This dropdown includes all the target samples that we defined in Step 3 of the guided setup of the project. So I'm going to click on the home page. And once a sample is selected, we'll get 2 new sections below. One is called Observations, and the other is called Success Criteria. The Observations section will display all observations for the target sample chosen above. There's also a button to start a new observation here, followed by a section that includes all global observations defined so far. Observations are the core element to every audit, each logging the details of one item you've observed during your evaluation. When we complete an observation, it'll be added to the bottom of this section for the target sample. You'll always be able to see the success criteria, user agent and browsing tool used, and the summary. Clicking anywhere in this overview will expand it to show the rest of the detail, and a set of actions you can take like editing and deleting. So let's go ahead and open this one up to see what the form looks like. Because there's potential for tracking a lot of information in an observation, the form is organized into 3 sections. The first section is called Categorization, and this is where we detail where the observation happened, the relevant success criteria, what we use to test, and whether the observation is happening on more than one target sample. The testing support of and using testing tool fields contain the list of browsers and tools that we define when creating the project. This categorization section is where the only two required fields, target sample and success criterion, are located. Everything else is optional in order to ensure it's flexible enough to accommodate your unique workflow. The details section is where we add specifics about the observation, including a summary for reporting, long-form observation details in a WYSIWYG, and any accompanying files, including images, video, and other documents. These files can also have a file name, alternative text, and description. Finally, the remediation section is where we can estimate the priority, the estimated effort of this observation, as well as document any recommended remediation steps and what teams may be responsible for remediating. To the right of observations is the success criteria section. This is where we can keep track of WCAG criteria tested for the target sample chosen. First, you'll see a series of filters. These allow you to filter criteria by status, like passed or untested, by WCAG level, or by WCAG version, so you can focus on a subset of criteria at a time. You'll notice that these filters are pre-configured on page load to include the WCAG version and level selected as the conformance target for this project. Below the filters are buttons for every WCAG success criteria, along with their current status. Clicking on a success criterion opens a panel where you can choose one of 6 statuses for it, either for this one target sample or for the entire sample. Setting a status for the entire sample is helpful in cases where you know the status applies everywhere. For example, a failure in the header navigation of a website would apply everywhere. Or if you know your site contains no audio or video content, you can mark all audio-visual criteria as not present. Utilizing these status options helps you keep track of progress and can surface useful stats in the audit report. At the bottom of the criterion panel is a button that shows more detail about it, including links directly to the Understanding and Techniques WAI documentation. Marking a criterion as failed will automatically open an observation form. When we're done with our audit and are ready to report the findings, we can use the Ready to Report Findings button at the bottom of the audit page. This will load a form with the last handful of fields that can be completed before moving on to the audit report. This audit findings form and the final report combine to encompass the 5th and final step of WCAG EM for reporting findings. Here we can set a report title, document the evaluation commissioner and evaluators, and write out a full executive summary. All these details will be reflected in the final evaluation report. All our hard work culminates in this evaluation report. This report defaults to a private visibility that's only accessible by logged-in team members, but it can also be shared with stakeholders either with a passcode we can set or marking it as publicly viewable to anyone with the link. I'm going to go ahead and make this one publicly viewable. There are also a variety of export options available too, including specifically formatted CSV files for Jira, as well as Azure DevOps, or just a plain CSV export. The report itself is split up into 3 sections: summary, stats, and observation details. The summary is just that, a summary of the scope of the audit as defined in the project, and the details entered in the audit findings form like the commissioner and executive summary. The stats section is next and contains some charts and graphs that organize the audit data in different ways. The by impact chart illustrates the impact of remediating the observations in the audit. Generally, the higher the priority and lower the effort, the more impact it is assumed to have, which is helpful for prioritizing remediation efforts. Observations per page is a donut graph that shows the overall spread of observations per target sample. The success criteria section compiles the totals of success criteria status by principal as well as by target sample. Finally, the overall percentages section highlights the percentage of success criteria tested as well as the percentage that were marked as passed, based on the criteria for the conformance target. These percentages are based solely on the success criteria statuses set during the audit. The last section compiles all observations across all target samples, organized by target sample. While the report details are easily exportable to a CSV that you can then manipulate as you need, there's also a tabular format called the Observation Visualization Table. This table lets you see the same observation data in a tabular format that can be filtered and sorted. For example, let's filter to all observations found with Site Improve. Great. And then sort by priority. The hope is that this visualization table can serve as another way to manipulate and understand the observation data, so the process of moving towards remediation is as smooth as possible. I hope you enjoyed this little walkthrough. Go ahead and sign up for a free 7-day trial so you can give it a try yourself.